without sound hides a fatal truth. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Drop a comment sharing where you're tuning in from. I love reading everyone. Let's step inside. There are noises in Nero Wolfe's house that are as dependable as the income tax. Fritz's soft-footed drift from kitchen to dining room, the bell's offended clank when somebody leans on it like it owes him money. Theodore Horstman's careful murmuring in the plant rooms upstairs, and Wolfe himself, mostly the turning of a page, or the faint snort that means my phrasing has stepped on his sensibilities. That Monday, the brownstone on West 35th gave me something it had never offered before. Silence. Not the respectable, padded quiet you get when the rugs are thick and the drapes are heavy and the house is constructed with the kind of solid intent that keeps out drafts and human enthusiasm. This was a gap in the day's sound, like a tooth missing from a grin, present by its absence, felt more than heard. I noticed it because I'm paid to notice things, and because Wolfe, for all his talk about comfort and habit, has the senses of a hound when habit gets nicked. It happened at 11 minutes to 1. I was at my desk in the office, where I do the work Wolfe calls indispensable on the days he's not calling it lamentable. The mail had been opened, the morning's callers had been dealt with by ignoring them. And I had just drafted a note to a client in Buffalo explaining that the firm of Nero Wolfe did not engage in family reconciliations unless there was a felony at the core. From the hall, the dining room door should have given a little sigh when Fritz opened it. Fritz never slams anything. He has a gentle pride in his hands and the objects they touch. The door doesn't squeak, but it whispers. Wood on hinges, old house manners. It didn't. There was no whisper, no step, no clink. For 3 seconds, the house held its breath. I looked up from the typewriter because I thought maybe I'd gone deaf in one ear, which can happen if you sit with the telephone pressed to your head as much as I do. Then I heard Wolfe's chair creak upstairs, faint but there. So it wasn't me. I got up, went into the hall, and listened like a fool. Nothing. Then, as if the house realized it had made a mistake and hurried to correct it, the dining room door whispered, and Fritz's step came through, and the world resumed. When I went back into the office, Wolfe's voice came from above, through the open transom of his bedroom and the open transom of the office, a voice with a deep, annoyed resonance that made the word silence sound like an accusation. "Archie." "Yes, sir," I called up. There was a pause. I could picture him standing in his doorway upstairs, his bulk framed by the hall's shadows, his fingers perhaps stroking that spot on his cheek where he sometimes presses when he is thinking or irritated or both. "Did you observe it?" I went still. Wolfe does not usually ask me if I've observed it unless it is a thing he has already named in his mind. "What? The omission?" I decided not to play dumb because Wolfe will always beat you at it. If you mean the 3 seconds of nothing at 11:49, yes. I observed it. I was about to call you and report my sudden spiritual awakening. A jest. His tone was dismissive. "Come." When Wolfe says come, he means come now, and he does not mean come upstairs. He means come to where I am, which is upstairs, and he knows it's an effort for me because he takes a sort of perverse satisfaction in the fact that my legs must do what his pride forbids his to do. I went up. In Wolfe's bedroom, he was not standing in the doorway. He was in his chair by the window, already seated as if he had never moved in his life, and any rumor to the contrary was malicious gossip. The window was open a crack, letting in the winter light and the city's distant murmur. His orchids were not there. That was the plant room's jurisdiction, but the air always smelled faintly of leaf mold and expensive tobacco in Wolfe's domain. He was holding a book open on his lap without reading it. His eyes were on me, heavy-lidded, as though I had been brought in for examination as an object. "Tell me," he said. There was a pause in the house. I said, "Like somebody hit a mute button." I heard nothing for 3 seconds, then the usual soundtrack came back. 3 seconds, he repeated. You're sure? I didn't count Mississippi's, I said, but it was long enough for me to wonder if the building had been quietly expropriated and relocated to Kansas. If you want precision, we can install a metronome. His mouth tightened, which in Wolfe is the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. It happened at 11 minutes to 1, he said. It will happen again. Will it? I said, and then the sensible part of my mind caught up. You mean you've noticed it before? Twice. Yesterday at the same time and Saturday. That's 3 days, I said. You didn't mention it. It was not yet a pattern. Wolfe's gaze shifted past me to the door, as if he could see through wood. Now it is a pattern. I had a reflexive impulse to point out that most patterns in Wolfe's life involve orchids, meals, and a strong aversion to strenuous motion. Instead, I said, Okay. So, what is it? A city utility burp? Something to do with the heating? A subway rumble cancelling out the other noises? His lip curled faintly. That lip curl is a signature. Wolfe's way of telling you your imagination has been cheap. The subway does not cancel out Fritz's footfall, he said, nor does the heating system suspend sound. This is no mechanical accident, Archie. I stared at him. I've heard Wolfe say a lot of things with certainty. Some of them proved right, some proved right after a few adjustments, and some proved wrong, which he prefers to call premature. But he had a particular tone now, the tone he uses when the brownstone has been affronted. You think somebody is doing it? I said slowly. Yes. Doing silence. Wolfe's eyes narrowed a fraction. Do not be flippant. It's my job, I said. All right. Say somebody's doing it. How? And why? And who has the nerve? Wolfe did not answer me. He did what he often does when he is about to force the world to change shape. He reached for the bell cord beside his chair and gave it a tug. Fritz came in almost at once, immaculate and calm, as if he had been standing outside the door waiting to be summoned into a play. His face is lined like a kindly map, and his eyes hold more information than he ever volunteers. Yes, Herr Wolfe? Fritz, Wolfe said. At 11 minutes to 1 there was again an interval of, how shall I say, acoustic absence. Did you experience it? Fritz's expression didn't change, but I saw the tiny flicker of attention in his eyes. Yes, he said. It is strange. I'm in the pantry, and then for a little moment it is like the house is far away. Like I'm in a room with thick walls. Wolfe's gaze shifted to me as if to say, There. A room with thick walls, I echoed. Like the vault at a bank. Fritz nodded. Yes, only it is not cold like a vault. It is polite, too polite. That made the hair on the back of my neck do a small, unpleasant rise. Wolfe said, You have mentioned nothing. Fritz spread his hands a little. It seemed not important. Also, Herr Wolfe, you do not like disturbances. I did not want to disturb you with... He searched for a word that would not offend Wolfe's dignity. A nonsense. Wolfe's nostrils flared, just once. He dislikes being protected from disturbances almost as much as he dislikes disturbances. It is not nonsense, he said, and then to Fritz, Thank you, you may go. Fritz went, and as the door closed behind him, Wolfe remained still, his eyes on the door as if it had insulted him personally. Then he said, Archie, someone has introduced a new room into my house. I let that sit for half a second. That, I said, is either brilliant or insane. Which one are we betting on today? Wolfe's eyes moved to mine, and for an instant there was a glint of something like satisfaction, which is always dangerous. It means he is enjoying himself. You will not like it, he said. I rarely like anything before lunch, I said. But I cope. How do you know it's a room? Because it behaves as a room behaves, Wolfe said. It encloses, it interrupts, it contains. For 3 seconds, the house's sound is contained elsewhere. I rubbed my chin. So you think somebody's doing renovations without a permit? If only, Wolfe said. No, Archie, it is not plaster and studs. It is intention. Wolfe can sound ridiculous when he gets philosophical about a practical matter. The trouble is, he's often right. All right, I said. Let's assume somebody is playing with our acoustics. What's the angle? Spying. Somebody listening in. Wolfe's mouth tightened again. Possibly. Or hiding. Or testing. Testing what? Wolfe's voice was flat. Testing me. I looked at him, and for a moment I saw not the man who refuses to climb stairs unless he must, but the man who sits in his chair and makes murderers collapse under the weight of his sentences. You think this is aimed at you personally, I said. It is my house, Wolfe said. Everything that happens within it is aimed at me personally. That's Wolfe. The world exists as an elaborate inconvenience designed to distract him from his orchids and his meals. Okay, I said. So what do we do? You want me to check the walls for, what, soundproofing? Hidden doors? A magician's trick panel? Wolfe stared at me as if I had offered him ketchup for his steak. You will do what you always do, he said. You will observe, you will inquire, you will be impertinent to strangers. You will return with facts. Sure, I said. Just point me at the stranger who brought a brand new invisible room into the brownstone. Wolfe didn't answer. He reached for the bell cord again and pulled it twice. That summons Saul Panzer on the telephone only if Saul is already on the line, which he never is. Usually it just summons Fritz again, which it did. Fritz appeared, and Wolfe said, Who rang the bell at 11:47? Fritz blinked. A woman, Herr Wolfe. She's in the front room. She says she must see you. She would not give a name to me, only she said she has been in this house before, and she must speak to you alone. Wolfe's eyes shifted to me, and I felt the faintest, unpleasant click of the pattern locking into place. Alone, I repeated. In your house. At this time. Convenient. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Archie will be present, he said to Fritz. Show her to the office. Fritz nodded and withdrew. Wolfe looked at me. His voice was calm, but I heard the steel under it. You will be careful, he said. With what? I asked. With the woman or with the new room? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. With both. I went down to the office and got behind my desk, mostly because I like to be seated when trouble walks in. Trouble has a habit of being taller than you expect. Wolfe came in a moment later and settled into his chair behind his desk with the practiced ease of a man who has made a lifelong study of sitting as if it were a branch of law. I had barely opened my notebook when Fritz brought her in. She was in her 30s, maybe 35, with the kind of smooth composure that is either expensive or born in. Her coat was dark and simple, her hair arranged with care, and her face had the pale, concentrated look of someone who has spent the last 48 hours not sleeping but thinking. She carried no bag, no umbrella, no visible weapon, which doesn't mean anything in New York. Her eyes went to Wolfe, and something flickered there. Relief or fear, or both. Then she looked at me, and the flicker sharpened into annoyance. I said I must speak to you alone, she told Wolfe. Wolfe's eyes didn't move. You said it to Fritz Brenner, he replied. In my house. I do not take instructions in my own house. This is Archie Goodwin. He is indispensable. I don't care what he is, she said. That, I said, is not the first time I've heard that sentence, but it still warms me. Please proceed, lady. We'll pretend I'm a lamp. She looked at me as if she considered throwing something, but she had nothing in her hands. Then her gaze snapped back to Wolfe. My name is Celia Rask, she said. I was here once, years ago. You helped my father. Wolfe's expression remained blank, but I saw the smallest movement in his eyes. That meant the name had landed somewhere in his mind. "Your father," Wolfe said. "Rask, the man who nearly went to prison for a crime he didn't commit," she said quickly. "He died last year." Wolfe inclined his head a fraction. "That was as close as he gets to condolence unless the deceased is an orchid." "And now," Wolfe said, "you propose that I assist you." "Why?" Celia Rask's composure cracked just enough to show what was under it. "Because someone is trying to erase something," she said. "Not a person, a place, a room." My pencil stopped. Wolfe's eyes did not change, but the air in the office did. "A room," Wolfe said softly. "Yes," she said, and her voice tightened as if the words hurt. "A room where a conversation happened. A room where something was said that must not be known. A room that isn't supposed to exist." I felt the urge to glance toward the hall, toward the dining room, toward the stairway, toward the invisible tooth missing from the house's grin. Wolfe's voice was still calm, but there was a new note in it, a kind of cold pleasure, like a man seeing an adversary step onto his chosen ground. "Miss Rask," Wolfe said, "you have come at an interesting time." She leaned forward a little, as if drawn by that note. "Then you understand." "I understand," Wolfe said, "that you are in danger of wasting my time. If you wish my attention, you will give me clarity. Begin at the beginning." Celia Rask inhaled once, sharply. Her eyes went to the closed door of the office, and for a moment I thought she expected it to disappear. Then she said, "The beginning is a room that doesn't make a sound, and the end, if you don't help me, is that nobody will ever prove what happened inside it." Wolfe's eyes held hers. His voice was a precise instrument. "You will tell me," he said, "what happened inside your silent room." And I, Archie Goodwin, had the uncomfortable certainty that the brownstone's 3 seconds of nothing had just acquired a motive and a guest list. I can't write it in Rex Stout's exact style, but I can continue this Nero Wolfe story with an original voice that keeps the same kind of measured deduction, character tension, and brownstone-centric strategy you set up, seamlessly from where we left off. Celia Rask swallowed as if Wolfe's question had weight. "You don't understand what you're asking," she said. "I understand precisely," Wolfe replied. His tone didn't rise. It didn't have to. "You have used a metaphor. If it is a metaphor, you have invaded my time. You will now repay me with facts." She looked at me again, quick and annoyed, then back to Wolfe. "I told you I needed to speak to you alone." Wolfe's eyelids lowered in a slow, patient insult. "Miss Rask, you are not in a position to bargain. Speak." Her jaw tightened. That expensive composure tried to reassemble itself, but there were gaps in it now, like a suit that didn't quite fit after a bad night. "It was 5 years ago," she said. "I worked for a foundation, Grantwell, a charitable outfit with good manners in public and sharp elbows in private. I was junior. I typed things. I scheduled things. I listened to people who assumed I couldn't matter." Wolfe's fingers touched the edge of the desk blotter, idle as if he were smoothing an invisible wrinkle. "Names. The president was Lionel Grant," she said. "Old money, new vanity. His chief counsel was Everett Dern, and the director of programs was Miriam Quayle." The names meant nothing to me, but Wolfe's eyes moved slightly, which told me they meant something to him, or would. Celia continued, "There was an internal dispute, a grant that shouldn't have been awarded, money that went to a shell, something like that. I didn't understand it all. I was just the person who saw a set of figures on a memo and thought, that's wrong." "And you spoke," Wolfe said. "I tried," she said. "To Miriam Quayle first. She told me to stop being imaginative. Then to Everett Dern, he smiled at me like I was a child and told me I'd misunderstand my own name if I saw it in print. Wolfe made a small sound, almost a grunt, but refined. And Lionel Grant? Celia hesitated. That hesitation was the first honest thing she'd shown. I didn't get to him, she said. Not directly, because there was a meeting. A meeting, I said. Because if you leave Wolfe alone too long, he'll make the other person talk in circles just to prove he can. Celia's eyes flicked to me with irritation, but she didn't stop. There was a room, she said, and the words came slower. At the Grantwell building, top floor, not a boardroom, not an office, a small room, no windows, thick walls. It was used for sensitive conversations. A vault, I murmured, and she shot me a look that said I'd stolen her line. Yes, she said, only not cold. It was designed to be comfortable. A couch, 2 chairs, a small table with a lamp. It felt like someone had built a confession booth for rich people. Wolfe's gaze had turned very still. You were in it. Not by choice, she said. I got a note. Handwritten. It told me to come to that room at noon, alone. It said the Foundation's future depended on it. I was young enough to think drama meant importance. And you went, Wolfe said. Yes. I waited. Then Lionel Grant came in with Everett Dern. Her voice tightened. They didn't sit. They stood, like judges. Lionel told me I'd been asking questions. Everett told me questions could be expensive. And you replied, Wolfe prompted. I said I wanted the truth, she said. I said the money trail didn't make sense. Lionel told me it didn't have to make sense to me. Everett told me that if I continued, I'd be destroying a public good for private anxiety. I watched Wolfe's face. He likes ethics the way some men like spices, as long as they're properly applied and not wasted. Celia took a breath. Then Lionel said something that changed the shape of it. He said the grant was a payment, a payoff, not for what they had done, but for what they had kept quiet. Wolfe's eyes narrowed a fraction. Quiet about what? Celia's hands clenched in her lap. About a person, a donor, a man who wanted his name nowhere near the paperwork. Lionel said the Foundation existed to launder reputations, not money. Everett laughed, actually laughed, and said the quiet room was the Foundation's only sacred place, because nothing said inside it could ever reach a courtroom. I felt my pencil move on its own. Nothing said inside it could ever reach a courtroom. That sounded like the kind of sentence that gets men killed, or at least ruined. And you left, Wolfe said. I tried, she said. Lionel blocked the door. Everett said they could make this easy or hard. I was frightened, but I'm not. She stopped, swallowing. I'm not stupid. I told them I'd resign, and I'd forget what I saw. I said I didn't want trouble. And they believed you, Wolfe said, skeptical. No, she said softly. They didn't. Lionel said forgetting wasn't enough. He said I'd need an incentive to forget. Everett said incentives could be arranged. She looked straight at Wolfe. Then the room went wrong. Wolfe did not move. Explain. Celia's throat worked. There was a moment, just a moment, where everything dulled, like sound was stuffed into cotton. Lionel's lips moved and I couldn't hear him. Everett turned his head as if listening for something, and then the feeling passed. I felt my skin prickle. It matched our 3 seconds. That happened, Wolfe said, in that room. Yes, she whispered, and Everett noticed it. He smiled. He said, there it is. Still works. Like it was a machine. Still works, I repeated. So it had happened before. Celia nodded once. Everett told Lionel that the room was secure, that it had been built by someone who understood discretion at a scientific level. Lionel didn't like it. He said it made him feel watched. Everett said that was the point. The room watched, and the room protected. Wolfe's eyes shifted, just slightly, toward the office walls, as though he were measuring their thickness with contempt. "And then?" Wolfe asked. Celia's voice steadied. "Then Lionel offered me money. A lot. Enough to buy my silence and make me feel guilty for refusing it. Everett said the money would be wired and a contract would be signed. Lionel said if I didn't sign, I'd never work again." "And you signed," Wolfe said. It was not a question. Celia's chin lifted in defiance and shame. "Yes," she said. "I signed. I took the money. I quit. I told myself I'd survived." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "And now, 5 years later, you have decided to recover your virtue." Her face flushed. Anger, embarrassment, maybe relief that someone had said it plainly. "No," she snapped. "I decided to survive again, because someone is hunting the room." "The room," I said, trying to keep my voice light and failing. "The actual physical room, not your memory of it." Celia's eyes fixed on me. "Yes, the room, because last week I received a message." "What kind of message?" Wolfe asked. "A key," she said. "In the mail. No return address. Just a small key and a card with 3 words. You were heard." The office felt smaller. Wolfe's voice remained level. "Heard by whom?" "That's what I tried to find out," Celia said. "I went back to the Grantwell building. I told myself I just needed to see the room, to prove I wasn't imagining it. But the top floor had been remodeled. The quiet room was gone. Not repurposed. Gone. Walls moved. Offices changed. And when I asked the receptionist, she looked at me like I'd asked where they kept the dragon." "You believe the room has been removed," Wolfe said. "I believe it's being erased," Celia said. "And I believe the people who built it, or used it, are now building it somewhere else. Because 2 days ago, at exactly 11 minutes to 1, I felt it again." I stared at her. "Where?" She swallowed. "In the lobby of this building," she said. "Across the street. I was watching your front door." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "You were watching my house?" "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze. "Because the card said you were heard, and the only person I could think of who would understand what that meant was you. Because when I felt that silence again, I realized it wasn't following me." "It was approaching," Wolfe murmured. Celia nodded once. "It's coming here," she said, "or it's already here." For 3 seconds, nobody in the office spoke. Not because the house had gone silent, but because the idea had. Then Wolfe leaned back a fraction in his chair, his face composed, his eyes alive. "Archie," he said, "telephone Saul Panzer." I reached for the phone. "On what grounds?" Wolfe's voice was almost gentle. "On the grounds that someone has presumed to introduce an instrument of secrecy into my home. And that is intolerable." Celia's breath hitched. "You believe me?" Wolfe looked at her, and I saw something colder than belief. Possession. "I believe," he said, "that you have brought me an offense. Whether your story is true in every detail is irrelevant, for the offense is already in my house." I dialed Saul, and as the phone began to ring, I found myself listening, absurdly, for that missing tooth in the day's sound, half expecting the brownstone to hold its breath again right on schedule. Saul picked up on the second ring, which is one reason Wolfe likes him. Another is that Saul has the decency to sound as if he's been awake and competent for hours, even when he hasn't. "Panzer." "Saul, it's Archie. You busy?" "I can be," Saul said. "What is it?" "Come to the office," I told him. "Right now. Bring your eyes and your appetite for oddities." There was a half-beat pause. The kind Saul uses to file away the tone and decide which drawer it belongs in. "Oddities I can do. Give me 15. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. Celia Rask sat very straight in the red leather chair, hands laced tight enough to make her knuckles pale. She had the look of someone who has stepped onto a narrow bridge and is pretending not to notice the drop. Wolfe said to her, "You will remain. You will answer questions when asked. You will not volunteer embellishments." "I'm not embellishing," she snapped, then caught herself and tried to smooth it. "All right." Wolfe's eyes came to me. "Archie, go to the front door. Observe the street." "Yes, sir," I said. "Should I wave at the invisible room if it floats by?" His mouth tightened. "Go." I went. The front hall smelled faintly of polish and old stone. I opened the inner door and peered through the glass panel of the front door like a man looking for a parade. Outside, West 35th Street was doing its usual impersonation of organized chaos. Delivery trucks double-parked, pedestrians weaving, a taxi honking as if honking were a constitutional right. Across the street, the building Celia had mentioned, an office structure with bland windows, sat there like a face with no expression. I looked at its lobby through the glass. From here, it was just a pale rectangle and some moving figures. No dragons. I went back to the office. Wolfe had not moved, which was comforting. Celia had shifted forward as if her body wanted to run while her pride insisted on sitting. Wolfe's gaze was on her like a paperweight. "Miss Rask," he said, "this key you received, do you have it?" She blinked and reached into her coat pocket, producing a small brass key on a plain ring. She held it out. Wolfe did not take it. He never takes anything if he can delegate the taking. I took it and examined it. It was old-fashioned, the kind of key that belongs to a lock you'd expect in a private office or a filing cabinet. Simple bit, no fancy grooves. It had a number stamped on it. 12. "No tag, no address," I said. Celia shook her head. "Just that card." "Do you have the card?" Wolfe asked. "Yes." She pulled out a white rectangle of stiff paper and handed it to me with a reluctance that suggested she feared it might bite. The words were printed, not handwritten. "You were heard. No signature, no flourish, no threat." Exactly. But it was a threat in the way a polite cough in a quiet theater is a threat. I handed the card to Wolfe. He held it delicately between thick fingers and stared at it as if the cardstock were offensive. "This is not," Wolfe said, "the product of a fool." "It doesn't have to be," I said. "Any print shop can—" He cut me off with a look. The phrasing. Not "we heard you," not "you were listened to." Passive voice. It implies inevitability. It implies a mechanism. Celia exhaled, a small shaky sound. That's what I felt. Like it wasn't a person. "It is always a person," Wolfe said, "even when he hides behind a mechanism." The bell clanked downstairs. I didn't move. Wolfe didn't move. We both waited because Fritz would handle the door, and if it was a salesman or a minister, Fritz would dispose of him. If it was Saul, Fritz would bring him in. It was Saul. Fritz's soft tread preceded him, and then Saul Panzer came into the office wearing his neat suit and his neat expression and the kind of polite calm that makes people underestimate him. "Morning," Saul said, glancing from me to Wolfe to Celia. His eyes did their quick, quiet measuring. "This looks cozy." "Saul," Wolfe said. "Sit." Saul sat in the chair I usually reserve for clients I don't trust. He didn't mind. He looked at Celia with mild curiosity. Wolfe said, "Miss Rask contends that a silent room existed at the Grantwell Foundation's building, used for confidential conversations. She contends it has been removed and that the phenomenon has, perhaps, manifested here." Saul's eyebrows rose a fraction. He glanced at me, and I could tell he was about to ask if Wolfe had finally started drinking before dinner. I said, "Don't look at me. I'm just the narrator." Saul's gaze returned to Wolfe. You want me to check the Grantwell building? Among other things, Wolfe said. First, I want you to learn whether Lionel Grant, Everett Dern, and Miriam Quayle exist as described, and what they are now doing. Also, whether Grantwell has recently remodeled its top floor and who performed the work. Saul nodded. I can do that. Good, Wolfe said. You will also discreetly determine whether any unusual equipment, acoustic, electrical, or otherwise, has been installed in or near this brownstone recently. Saul blinked. In your house? In my environment, Wolfe corrected. You will begin with inquiries among contractors, delivery men, and anyone else who might have been paid to install something without asking questions. Saul's mouth tightened. That's broad. Then be intelligent, Wolfe said. Saul gave a small shrug that meant yes. Celia leaned forward. You think someone installed something here without your knowledge? Wolfe looked at her. Miss Rask, do not confuse my lack of interest in carpentry with ignorance of my house. Nevertheless, an intrusion is possible. I turned the key over in my fingers. What about this? Should we try it in every lock in New York? Wolfe's eyes shifted to the key. Not every lock. Some locks. And how do we pick which ones? I asked. He looked at me as if the answer were on the ceiling. By thinking. He paused, then said, Archie, take Miss Rask's account seriously, but do not accept it unexamined. You will go to the Grantwell Foundation. Celia stiffened. They'll recognize me. Excellent, Wolfe said. Recognition may provoke error. I said, You want me to stroll in and ask for the missing room? You will not be crude, Wolfe said. You will be yourself. You will inquire about employment, about grants, about anything you please. You will observe the building. You will look for alterations, for seams, for signs of recent construction. You will also, if possible, determine whether any room on that floor has unusually thick walls, unusual ventilation, or unusual door hardware. Saul let out a quiet breath through his nose, halfway between amusement and admiration. He's serious. I'm always serious, Wolfe said. The clock on Wolfe's desk ticked with a deliberate, officious sound. I glanced at it. It was 12:58. The air in the office felt slightly tighter, as if the house itself was paying attention. Celia's eyes flicked toward the transom. It happens at 11 minutes to 1, she whispered. I looked at Wolfe. He was watching the clock. His face was calm, but I could see the concentration in the set of his jaw. He was waiting, not like a man hoping for confirmation, but like a man expecting an opponent to show up when summoned. The second hand moved. 12:59, 12:59 and 30. No one spoke. 1 o'clock. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. I almost let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then, at 1:01, late by a minute, which was somehow worse, the house did it again. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a sensation, like pressure shifting. The office seemed to thicken, the air becoming padded, the edges of things rounding off. Saul's face, across from me, looked fractionally too far away. Celia's breath stopped. Even the ticking of the clock, Wolfe's beloved metronome of order, vanished as if someone had plucked it out of the air. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then the world snapped back. The clock ticked. A car horn outside stabbed the air. Fritz's faint movement in the hall returned like a cue in a play. Celia let out a ragged breath. Saul's eyes were wide now, and for Saul, that's practically hysteria. What the hell was that? Saul said softly. Wolfe did not react like a man startled. He reacted like a man vindicated. He leaned back a fraction, steepled his fingers, and said with quiet satisfaction, Now, gentlemen and Miss Rask, we are no longer dealing with a story. I cleared my throat, because my voice needed proving to myself. Okay, I said. We've got ourselves a traveling pocket of silence. Wolfe's gaze went to me, steady and cold. No, Archie. We have an intruder, and intruders in this house are dealt with. Saul looked from Wolfe to me. How do you deal with something you can't see? Wolfe's mouth tightened into something that might almost have been a smile if Wolfe were the smiling type. By compelling it, he said, to reveal the man who uses it. For about 10 seconds after the sound came back, the four of us just sat there, like a jury that has heard the confession and is waiting for the judge to tell them what to do with it. Celia Rask's hands were trembling now. She tried to hide it by clasping them tighter, which only made the tremor more visible. Saul Panzer had gone still in the way he does when he's registering a new fact that doesn't fit his file cabinet. Wolfe looked almost content, which is a word I rarely get to use for him outside of mealtimes and orchid hours. I broke the silence the old-fashioned way, by talking. So, I said, we've confirmed the phenomenon. Nobody hallucinated. The house can be muffled like a pillow for 3 seconds. The question is, what can we do with that besides start charging admission? Wolfe's eyes stayed on me. You will do nothing frivolous. I'm not frivolous, I said. I'm coping. Wolfe ignored that. He turned his head slightly toward Saul. Panzer, you will treat this as a physical intrusion. There must be an apparatus, a device, an installation, something that produces an effect on air, on vibration, on perception. Find it. Saul nodded slowly. I'll start with the obvious. Contractors, neighbors, anybody who's been in the basement or the walls. Also, Wolfe said, I want you to visit the building across the street. Speak to the superintendent. Ask about remodeling, new tenants, unusual deliveries. Saul made a face. You want me to walk in and ask if anyone has delivered a silence machine? You will ask about soundproofing, construction, unusual electrical work, Wolfe said. If you must, you may pretend to represent a firm concerned with, what do you call it, noise pollution. Saul's mouth twitched. I'll improvise. Wolfe's gaze shifted to Celia. Miss Rask, you will tell me the address of the Grantwell Foundation. She blinked, then gave it. I wrote it down, though I already knew Wolfe would have it memorized before my pencil reached the period. And the names of the individuals you mentioned, Wolfe added. Lionel Grant, Everett Dern, Miriam Quayle. Also any other person who had access to the quiet room. Assistants, engineers, security. Celia hesitated. I don't know who built it. But security, there was a man named Halpern, Walter Halpern. He ran the floor like it was his private ship. Wolfe nodded once. Good. He turned to me. Archie, you will go to Grantwell immediately. I glanced at the clock. Just past 1. Lunchtime had been stabbed, but not yet killed. And leave you alone with the silence, I said. With Fritz and Theodore, Wolfe replied. And with my displeasure. Go. I stood. Celia rose too, quick, like she was afraid Wolfe might change his mind and decide to keep her as a houseplant. You want me to come? She asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. No. You will remain here. Her face tightened. I told you they'll recognize me. That could help. It could also hinder, Wolfe said, and it is my choice. Archie will go, and he will not be distracted by your emotional respiration. Celia's cheeks flushed. She looked as if she might argue again, then caught the look in Wolfe's eyes, the look that says he has already arranged the board and your moves are irrelevant. All right, she said stiffly. I headed for the door. Saul stood as well. I'll get moving, Saul said to Wolfe. You want me to call in with anything? You will call, Wolfe said, and you will not embellish. Facts. Saul gave a short nod and left, and I followed him out of the office. In the hall, Fritz appeared like a benevolent ghost. Archie, he said softly, you will have lunch. I'll have air, I said, Keep mine warm if you can. If not, I'll eat later and pretend it's intentional." Fritz's eyes flicked toward the office door. "Herr Wolfe is upset." "That," I said, "is like saying the Atlantic is damp." I grabbed my coat and hat and went out. On the street, winter light bounced off car roofs and shop windows. The city sounded normal, which was oddly reassuring. I walked east, hailed a taxi, and gave the driver the Grantwell address. As the cab moved, I did what I always do when Wolfe throws me a new kind of madness. I tried to turn it into something with edges. A silent room, thick walls, a 3-second acoustic absence, a key numbered 12, a card, "You were heard." The thing that bugged me wasn't the silence itself. New York offers plenty of silence if you pay enough and put enough carpets down. It was the behavior, a timed interval, a sensation that seemed to envelop the space and then release it. That's not just soundproofing. That's control, and control is Wolfe's native language, unless someone else is speaking it in his house. Grantwell's building turned out to be one of those sleek midtown structures that look like they were designed by a committee trying not to offend anyone. Glass, stone, brushed metal, a lobby that smelled like lemon polish and money. I walked in like I belonged there, because if you don't, you'll get stopped, and if you do, you'll still get stopped, but at least you'll have the moral victory. A security desk sat near the entrance. Behind it was a man with the posture of someone who has been told his job is important and has believed it. His hair was cut short, his suit was too tight in the shoulders, and his eyes were scanning the lobby like he expected trouble to sprint. Trouble, in this case, was me. "Can I help you?" he called as I approached. "I hope so," I said friendly. "I'm here to see Mr. Everett Dern." The security man's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Appointment?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm optimistic." He didn't smile. "Name?" "Archie Goodwin." He looked down at a screen, typed, frowned, typed again. "No appointment," he said. "Then we're consistent," I replied. "Is Mr. Dern in?" He looked up. "Why?" This is where you decide whether to lie like a gentleman or tell the truth like an idiot. I chose the gentleman. "I represent a client considering a substantial donation," I said. "We'd like to discuss the Foundation's program priorities." That got me a flicker of interest. Money always does. He said, "Who's your client?" I gave him a name that sounded plausible and untraceable on short notice. One of those family trusts that exist mostly as whispers. His eyes held mine. "Wait here." He picked up a phone, murmured into it, listened, then said, "Mr. Dern is unavailable." "Shame," I said. "What about Ms. Miriam Quayle?" He repeated the process. More murmuring, more listening, then, "Ms. Quayle is in meetings." "I'm sensing a theme," I said. "How about Lionel Grant?" This time, the security man didn't call. His expression hardened. "Mr. Grant doesn't meet walk-ins," he said. "Then he's missing out," I said. "All right. Who does meet walk-ins?" "There's got to be someone here whose job is to talk to strangers with wallets." He stared at me for a beat, then said, "You can speak to development, 3rd floor, but you'll need a visitor badge." He slid a clipboard toward me. I signed the name I'd given him and took the badge. The security man watched me like he was measuring how fast he could tackle me if I went rogue. As I headed for the elevator bank, I caught a glimpse of a man crossing the lobby from the side corridor, tall, gray-haired, wearing a suit that fit too well to be off the rack. He moved with the calm certainty of someone who gives orders rather than takes them, and the security man's posture shifted, subtle but definite, like a dog recognizing the person who holds the leash. The gray-haired man's gaze slid over me without stopping, but I felt it, an awareness, a brief tightening as if the air had been tested. He disappeared into a private elevator. I watched the doors close and thought, Walter Halpern, maybe, or someone like him. I took the public elevator to the third floor, but I wasn't thinking about development. I was thinking about what Wolfe had told me to look for: alterations, seams, hardware, thick walls, and what Celia had said. The quiet room was on the top floor. So I did what I do best. I smiled politely at a receptionist on 3, asked for brochures, made a note of nothing, and then, as if I'd gotten a text message with a sudden change of heart, I drifted back toward the elevators and pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator rose with a soft mechanical sigh, and as the numbers climbed, I found myself listening. Not for the normal hum of cables and machinery, but for that other thing, that missing tooth, that polite, padded nothing. When the doors opened on the top floor, the hallway was carpeted thick enough to smother footsteps, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint, just a whisper of it, like a secret. I stepped out, and the first thing I noticed was the wall. It wasn't the wall itself, exactly. It was the way the wall didn't belong, a section of it too smooth, too new, meeting older paneling with a seam that had been painted over but not perfectly. A careful job, but not careful enough for someone trained by Nero Wolfe to distrust careful jobs. I walked toward it, casually, like a man admiring art he couldn't afford. And as I drew near, I felt it. Not the full 3 seconds. Not yet. But a faint pressure shift, like the hallway was breathing in. Somewhere behind the too smooth wall, something was waiting to make the world go quiet. I stopped a foot short of the too smooth wall and pretended to read a framed photograph on the opposite side. Some glossy shot of men in suits shaking hands over a ceremonial check. I wasn't interested in the check. I was interested in the way the air felt, as if someone had laid a thin quilt over the hallway. New York buildings have 1,000 microclimates. You step from a drafty stairwell into a heated corridor, and your skin registers it without your permission. This was different. It wasn't temperature. It was presence. A faint, polite insistence that sound and space behave themselves. I moved closer, slow, like a man who has all day. At 3 feet, nothing changed. At 2 feet, my ears did that subtle internal adjustment, like they were trying to decide whether the building's hum had shifted. The elevator behind me dinged far away and sounded farther than it should. At 1 foot, I could have sworn the carpet under my shoes got thicker. There were office doors along the hall, each with a small brushed metal nameplate. Most were dull. Development, programs, council. The door nearest the smooth wall had no nameplate at all, and no handle either, just a flush panel, painted the same shade as the wall, with a seam so fine it might have been a shadow. A door that didn't want to be a door. I reached up casually and ran my fingers along the edge of the too new section as if admiring the paint job. The surface was warmer than the adjacent paneling, which might have meant new drywall over old space. Or it might have meant nothing. The important part was the seam at the baseboard. The molding met, not quite square like someone had forced a fit. Then I heard a sound behind me. Not loud, just a soft, controlled throat clear that said, "I'm here," without having to say it twice. I turned. The gray-haired man from the lobby stood 10 yards down the hallway, hands at his sides, posture relaxed. Up close, he looked late 50s, maybe early 60s, with the kind of face that has learned to show nothing unless it wants to. He wore a security badge clipped to his jacket pocket, but it wasn't the same as the lobby badges. His looked permanent, authority in plastic. He smiled faintly. "Can I help you?" he asked. It was the same sentence the lobby man had used, but from this mouth it wasn't a question. It was an inventory. I offered my best harmless grin. "I'm looking for development." "That's 3 floors down," he said pleasantly. "Elevators are tricky," I said. "Sometimes you push the wrong button and end up where the expensive secrets are." His eyes flicked to the wall beside me, then back. "This floor isn't for visitors." "I have a badge," I said, lifting it. He didn't glance at it. Badges don't grant permission. People do. Then we're in luck, I said. You look like a person. The faint smile stayed, but it cooled. Name? Archie Goodwin. Who are you with? An interested party, I said. His gaze sharpened. Interested in what? Now we were doing the dance where each step is an accusation wearing a polite shoe. Philanthropy, I said smoothly. The kind that keeps accountants awake. I see, he said, in the tone that meant he saw nothing he liked. And you wandered up here on your way to philanthropy. I'm curious, I admitted. I like knowing where the money sleeps. He held my eyes another beat, then said, This way, please. It wasn't phrased as an order, but it arrived as one. He turned and walked toward me, not rushing. He didn't need to rush. A man who controls a floor doesn't hurry. As he approached, the hallway's atmosphere changed again. Subtle, like a shift in pressure before weather. The padded feeling receded. The air became ordinary. He stopped beside me, close enough that I could smell his aftershave. Something clean and expensive. I'm Walter Halpern, he said, security director. So Celia hadn't invented that. Good or bad. Nice to meet you, I said. I've heard the place is safe. It is, Halpern said. His eyes moved to the wall. And I saw something then, just for a fraction, an irritation. Not fear, not guilt. Irritation, like a man who has been forced to acknowledge a fly. You were touching the wall, he said. I'm a tactile learner, I said. It's a gift and a curse. Halpern's gaze did not warm. You will come with me. Sure, I said. Where to? Downstairs. Somewhere you're permitted. I let him escort me toward the elevator because the first rule of poking a hornet's nest is, don't do it with your face pressed against the hive. As we walked away from the smooth wall, I listened. Normal sounds came back in full, the faint whir of ventilation, the far-off murmur of voices behind doors, the soft click of Halpern's shoes on carpet. No silence. Not now. Halpern pressed the elevator button. We waited. I watched his hands. Steady, no tremor, nails trimmed. Not a laborer's hands, a manager's. You know, I said conversationally, I get why you'd want this floor locked down. People with money have privacy allergies. Halpern's eyes stayed forward. Privacy is not an allergy. No, I agreed. It's a currency. The elevator arrived. We stepped in. Halpern pressed 3 with a finger that didn't hesitate. As the elevator descended, he said, Your badge says you're authorized to meet with development. You will do that, or you will leave. Fair, I said. But just so I understand the rules, if a donor wanted to meet someone upstairs, could they? Halpern's head turned slightly. His eyes met mine and his voice became very calm. Donors meet who we decide they should meet. That was the second sentence I'd heard today that belonged in a courtroom someday, if anybody could ever prove it. The doors opened on 3. Halpern stepped out and guided me toward the development office like a man delivering a package he didn't trust to stay put. The receptionist on 3 looked up and blinked at the sight of Halpern escorting me, which told me that Halpern did not personally walk people around unless he wanted them to feel small. Halpern said to her, He's here for development. Keep him here. Then he looked at me. Do we understand each other? I smiled. Perfectly. You don't like tourists. His eyes held mine. I don't like anomalies. He turned and walked away, and that word stuck to me like a burr. Anomalies. He hadn't said intruders. He hadn't said liars. He'd said anomalies as if my presence was not a moral offense but a statistical one. The receptionist recovered and put on her professional smile. Can I help you? Yes, I said. I'd like to discuss giving you a lot of money. That's still the best sentence in the English language, right? She laughed politely, and I let her lead me into a small meeting room with brochures and framed mission statements. A woman from development came in, pleasant, polished, and trained to treat vagueness as a sign of wealth. I gave her 10 minutes of nonsense about philanthropic priorities, asked a few pointed questions about recent projects, and watched her answers for flinches. Nothing obvious, but she did say one thing that mattered. The foundation has been restructuring, streamlining. We've renovated the top floor to better suit our needs. Who did the renovation? I asked, like I cared about contractors. Her smile stayed fixed, but her eyes slid sideways briefly. I'm not sure, she said. Facilities handled that. Facilities, I said, storing it. And where is facilities? She gave me a name, Martin Klein, and an office number on the 5th floor. I thanked her, promised to be in touch, and left the meeting room with my badge still on and my smile still harmless. In the hallway, the elevator waited like a neutral party. I pressed 5. As I rose, I tried to connect the facts the way Wolfe would, except with more legwork and less sitting. Celia's silent room had been on the top floor. Grantwell had renovated that floor. Halpin patrolled it personally and disliked anomalies, and the wall I'd found had felt, just for a moment, like the edge of that same padded absence. Which meant one of two things. Either Grantwell had built a room that could manipulate sound and perception, and they were hiding it behind a wall, or Grantwell had removed it and the mechanism was portable enough to be moved somewhere else, like, say, across the street from Wolfe's brownstone, or inside it. The elevator doors opened on 5. I stepped out, and immediately heard a familiar, controlled throat clear from behind me, as if the building itself had learned the sound of my curiosity and had assigned it a shadow. I didn't turn right away. I walked 3 steps into the hallway, then stopped beside a water cooler and slowly pivoted. Walter Halpern stood just outside the elevator doors, looking at me with the mild patience of a man watching a child test a fence. You pushed the wrong button again, he said. Elevators, I sighed. They're my weakness. Halpern's faint smile returned, thinner than before. Mr. Goodwin, he said, I think it's time you left our building. I nodded. Maybe, but before I go, tell me something, purely for my education. His eyes stayed on mine. What? I leaned in just a little, as if sharing a private joke. Where? I asked. Did you put the room that doesn't make a sound? Halpern didn't answer me. That, more than any confession, told me I'd stepped on the right nerve. For a full second he just stood there, studying my face as if recalculating a sum that had suddenly acquired a remainder. Then his expression settled, not into anger, not even caution, but into something colder and more professional. You've mistaken your role, he said. You're a visitor who has overstayed. Story of my life, I said. But I asked a question. And you won't get an answer, he replied. You will leave. Now. There were no guards rushing in. No raised voices. Halpern didn't need them. He had already decided I was finished here, and men like Halpern tend to be right about things until someone stronger proves them wrong. I let him escort me back to the lobby and out onto the street, my badge reclaimed and my curiosity officially unwelcomed. As the building doors closed behind me, I felt something else close too. Not a wall this time, but a circle. They knew Wolfe was aware now, which meant Wolfe would act. I hailed a cab and was halfway back to the brownstone before my phone rang. Goodwin, Wolfe's voice said, without greeting. I was about to call, I said. Grantwell's top floor has been remodeled. There's a hidden wall that feels wrong, and Walter Halpern guards it like a saint guards a relic. Apt, Wolfe said. Did you provoke him? Only gently, I said. He dislikes anomalies. So do I, Wolfe replied. Return. When I arrived, the brownstone felt alert. Not quiet exactly, but attentive, like a chessboard mid-game. Celia Rask was in the office, pacing. Saul Panzer sat in my chair, notebook open, his expression intent. Wolfe sat immobile behind his desk, fingers steepled, eyes bright. Saul looked up. "You miss much, Archie." "Only lunch and my dignity," I said. "What's new?" Saul nodded toward Wolfe. "Our friend here has been productive." Wolfe spoke without preamble. Panzer has confirmed that a private contractor, Arcady Systems, performed Grantwell's top-floor renovation. Arcady specializes in secure environments for corporate and governmental clients. "Let me guess," I said. "They don't advertise." "They do not," Wolfe agreed. "Their principals include a former acoustic engineer and a former intelligence contractor. One Walter Halpern served as their security consultant on multiple projects." Celia stopped pacing. "So the room was real?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "and portable." Saul added, "Arcady also handled a consulting installation for a shell company that recently leased basement space in the building across from us." That landed. "And deliveries?" I asked. Saul nodded. "Unmarked crates. Late hours. Heavy equipment. They paid extra for discretion." Celia's face had gone pale. "Then it's here." "Not entirely," Wolfe said. "The apparatus produces an acoustic isolation field, localized, timed, and limited. It does not remove sound from the world. It removes the world from sound." I frowned. "That's a neat trick." "It is an expensive one," Wolfe said. "And it has a singular purpose, to permit conversations that cannot be recorded, overheard, or later corroborated." "And blackmail," I said. "And coercion," Wolfe added, "and contracts enforced by fear." Celia whispered, "They told me nothing said inside could reach a courtroom." "An exaggeration," Wolfe said, "but a tempting one." Saul closed his notebook. "There's more. Lionel Grant is dead. Heart attack 6 months ago. Miriam Quayle retired abruptly. Everett Dern now consults privately, through Arcady." Wolfe nodded as if a final piece had clicked into place. "Walter Halpern," Wolfe said, "was never merely security. He was custodian, guardian of the room." "And when Grant died," I said, "the room outlived its creator." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "So Halpern preserved it, improved it, and relocated it when necessary." Celia sank into a chair. "Then why me? Why send the key?" "Because," Wolfe said, "someone else has been using the room, and you are proof that the room's past was not as silent as Halpern believed." I blinked. "Someone cut him out." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and Halpern does not tolerate anomalies." The bell rang. Once. Then again. Fritz appeared. "Herr Wolfe, Mr. Halpern is at the door. He insists on seeing you." Wolfe's lips curved, barely. "Excellent. Show him in." Halpern entered the office with the composure of a man who believes he is still in control. He glanced once at Saul, once at Celia, and finally at me. His expression tightened. "You," he said. "Me," I agreed. Wolfe did not offer him a chair. That was deliberate. "Mr. Halpern," Wolfe said, "you're here because your silence has trespassed." Halpern's gaze flicked to the walls, then back. "I don't know what you think." "I think," Wolfe said, "that you have trafficked in secrecy as a commodity. That you oversaw the construction of an acoustic isolation chamber designed to facilitate coercion and untraceable agreements. That you preserved this apparatus beyond its original patron and continued to deploy it for profit." Halpern's jaw tightened. "You can't prove that." "No," Wolfe said calmly, "but I do not need to." Halpern laughed once, sharp. "Then what is this? A lecture?" "It is an end," Wolfe said, "because you made one error." Halpern's eyes narrowed. "Which?" "You allowed the room to be used against someone who did not accept silence as final," Wolfe said, glancing briefly at Celia. And you brought its echo to my house. Halpin stiffened. I did no such thing. You supervised the installation across the street, Wolfe said. Time to test its range. Its reach. You wished to know whether it could be deployed near an uncontrolled variable. Meaning you, I said. Halpin's gaze snapped to me, then back to Wolfe. And, Wolfe continued, you underestimated my intolerance for intrusion. Halpin straightened. You still have nothing. Wolfe reached to his desk and pressed a button. The office door opened. 2 men entered, plain clothes, professional, unmistakable. Mr. Halpin, Wolfe said, meet representatives of the district attorney's office. Halpin's composure cracked. Not much, but enough. This is absurd, he said. On what grounds? 1, Wolfe said. Illegal surveillance infrastructure. 2, conspiracy to obstruct justice. 3, coercion facilitated by non-consensual confinement. Halpin stared. You can't prove, the older of the 2 men spoke. We don't need to. Arcady Systems has already agreed to cooperate. Halpin's face went grey. Saul exhaled softly. The men moved in. Halpin did not resist. As they took him away, he turned once more toward Wolfe. You think this ends it, he said. Wolfe's gaze was steady. I think, he said, that silence, when abused, becomes evidence. Halpin was gone. For a moment, the house felt lighter. Celia Rask sat very still. So, it's over. For you, Wolfe said. Yes. The money you accepted will be returned under advisement of counsel. Your testimony will be interesting. She nodded, tears threatening but not falling. Thank you. Wolfe inclined his head. Justice, he said, is not silence, it is articulation. Later, after Celia had gone and Saul had taken his leave, Fritz served dinner. The house had returned to its proper sounds, the clink of silverware, the murmur of the city outside, the steady ticking of the clock. Wolfe ate with satisfaction. At least, I said, the brownstone is quiet again. Wolfe cut his meat with precision. No, Archie, it is honest again. I considered that, then smiled. In this town, I said, that's louder than it sounds.